This disturbing Raja Jackson situation is crazier than most people realize. I mean, he should be in jail right now. I have no idea how he's not. We break down the now public Ghislaine Maxwell DOJ interview, including the Trump Epstein of it all. As Trump has armed troops in DC, he's now eyeing Chicago, New York, and Baltimore next, with him now sparring with Governor Wes Moore. And Abrego Garcia has now been taken by ICE again. We're talking about all of that today on your brand new Philip DeFranco show, your daily dive into the news, starting with this. This Raja Jackson situation's insane. And if you're like, who the hell is that? Yeah. So he's Rampage Jackson's son, who, if you're not in that world, Rampage Jackson, very famous fighter. I guess now he's also a streamer. You have Raja Jackson, who's streaming. He's also an MMA fighter. And, he wants to make a name for himself that's outside of his father's name. And well, I guess mission accomplished, because his name is out there, though it's not for good reasons. Because there was an event being held on Saturday by Knox X Pro Entertainment and Academy in Los Angeles, and it was getting streamed on Kick. And at the start of the stream, you had Raja and a wrestler by the name of Psycho Stu encountering each other. With Stu, seemingly as a work, right, something for the story, for the event, smashing a beer can on Raja's head. With things then getting pretty tense, but Stu apologizing a few times, explaining that he thought Raja was a worker, aka another wrestler.
I'm sorry, bro.
Hey, it's gonna all work out.
I apologize.
I appreciate it.
I didn't know. I thought you were a worker. Camera.
I get it. We're gonna work it out. Well, he's gonna come out on your mat, too. I know you keep thinking we're working. We're always working.
Right, with that last bit there, you can see that people involved in the event, they're trying to turn that into something in the ring, or where they can organize a way for the two of them to work it out on the mat. Then, another person outlets have identified as wrestler AJ Mana seemed to suggest that Raja get real payback.
Even when we are working like that, you don't fucking,
That's what I'm saying.
But he doesn't know him like that. He's
You don't.
done that.
He's a fucking idiot. Hey. So when you run in on his, you can give him his receipt.
Or with the receipt being, like a real hit. And on the stream, you even had Raja saying, like, we'll be good if I get my lick in. And at various points on the stream, Raja seems to think he's serious about fighting back.
No, I'm beating this guy's ass, bro.
And while you do have multiple outlets saying that there was supposed to be a scripted response from Raja, he eventually said during the stream,
Ain't no script, bro. It's not gonna be scripted. I'm telling you that right now. I promise you. They told me to hit him and just leave. Somebody who pulled me off of him will leave. I'm telling you. I'm gonna hit him as many times as I can. Watch. I'm not gonna fake it.
He also responded to people in the chat a lot, as it seems they were egging him on.
How many subs to knock him out? That's a good question. I don't know. 50 subs, knock him out. 50 subs.
And then, once Raja jumps into the ring, the stream shows him lifting Stu into the air, slamming him into the ground, and then not just getting a lick in, throwing punch after punch after punch, even after Stu can't fight back and is completely motionless. I can't show you the video, but he punches at least 20 times, or with it seeming like he lost consciousness, without a bunch of people stepping in to remove Raja, get him off of Stu, and he was then walked out of the building.
At the end of the day, I'm gonna stand up for my fucking self because I'm tired of everybody playing with me, bro.
With a journalist who's covered wrestling and MMA for decades saying that what happened here may be the worst thing I've ever seen in a ring. Right, and as far as what happened, you had another reporter saying that the spot was planned, but when Raja followed up with heavy punches, he wasn't planned to do that kind of damage. And after this attack, you had Stu being quickly transported to the hospital for treatment. And as you can imagine, there's been a lot of outrage among the reactions. With, for example, Knock X releasing a statement sending good thoughts to Stu and adding, what was supposed to be a planned and agreed upon wrestling spot turned into a selfish, irresponsible act of violence, saying this egregious act is reprehensible and never should have occurred. In the 17 years of operation of Knock X Pro Wrestling Academy, there has never been anything as heinous take place such as this, and we apologize to our patrons and fans. Raja's father, Rampage Jackson, also responded, both condemning his son's actions, but explaining what he said was some of the story. Writing, Raja was told he could get his payback in the ring. I thought it was a part of the show, saying it was bad judgment and a work that went wrong, and adding Raja is an MMA fighter, not a pro wrestler, and had no business involved in an event like this. I don't condone my son's actions at all. But then adding, he suffered a concussion from sparring only days ago and had no business doing anything remotely close to physical contact. I'm very upset that any of this happened, but my main concern now is that Mr. Smith will make a speedy recovery. And as far as Stu's condition, you had a wrestler who stepped in to stop Jackson, telling USA Today that he was awake and talking on Sunday, but had broken bones in his face and lost a lot of teeth. With him adding, he was choking on his own blood and teeth. Somebody reminded me there's kids there, and then I was like, oh my God. With Stu's brother also reportedly asking for prayers as he's in stable but critical care. And just tons of people in the wrestling world sounding off, saying things like, I've known and trained with Stu for 15 years. He is a former US Army veteran and amazing guy. There are no excuses for what happened in that ring. That was vomit-inducing criminal behavior. You also had some pointing to the fact that Stewart had previously talked openly about how he turned to this sport after being in the military and found that wrestling gave him structure, brotherhood, a way to channel his energy and fight through the battles within. I mean, you even had the likes of Mr. Beast chiming in, offering help to Stewart, saying this hurts to see, especially because I read he was a veteran that used wrestling as an outlet to get over PTSD. Genuinely, if anyone connected to him knows of a way I can help, please reach out. And then with all this, you had some accusing Raja of nearly killing Stewart and arguing he should face charges, which on that note, a spokesperson for the LAPD did tell multiple outlets that they're investigating the incident, but they didn't give any further details. And then as far as other potential consequences, it seems like Raj has been suspended from streaming on Kick for violating the platform's guidelines. And while of course, I'd love to know your opinion, whether you agree or disagree with me, I gotta say, this motherfucker belongs in jail. I've seen some people saying, oh, well, he got rage baited into it, whether it be that other wrestler talking about receipts or people in his chat going like, oh, you're soft. But I don't know, call me crazy. I don't think, Your Honor, I got triggered is a defense. Your Honor, Clout Goblin 69 said I was a soft boy, so I had to let him know I'm not. And the way he continued to pummel this man while he looked unconscious, I don't know how you argue that's not attempted murder. Because again, having a fragile ego is not a legal defense. From Stu's apology and the handshake to just the assault, it's just documentation of what very much appears to be premeditation. But as far as the what should happen versus what will happen, we're gonna have to wait to see. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. But then next up, while we're on the topic of people who should be locked up, we've got to talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, because her interview with the DOJ is now public and there's a lot to dive into. And where we'll start is with the Donald Trump of it all.
Did you ever observe President Trump receive a massage?
Never. I think they were friendly, like people are in social settings. I don't think they were close friends, or I certainly never witnessed the president in any of, I don't recall ever seeing him in his house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects.
And did you ever hear Mr. Epstein or anybody say that President Trump had done anything inappropriate with masseuses or with anybody in your world?
Absolutely never.
Now with that, of course, we're seeing a lot of skeptical reactions because arguably she has a lot to gain by saying this. Right? Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence. She's already expressed her desire to be pardoned, and Trump said publicly, I'm allowed to pardon her. So even though Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche prefaced the interview with this,
by you meeting with us today, we're really just meeting. I'm not promising to do anything. I'm not promising to ask Judge Nathan or any of the judges that's been assigned to your case to do anything. We're just talking.
You have many arguing that the promise doesn't have to be stated or written down on paper, that it's just obviously implied. And with that, you have people pointing to how in the interview, Maxwell even really seeed to butter up Trump.
President Trump was always very cordial and very kind to me. And I just want to say that I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming the president now. And I like him. And I've always liked.
And of course, you're seeing this as Maxwell has now already been transferred to a famously cushy prison for white-collar criminals in Texas, and we still have no explanation for why that happened. But also, with Maxwell, she didn't just exonerate Trump. She threw a bucket of cold water on the idea that Epstein kept some kind of client list.
There's no list. There's no list of people getting massages. I can barely recall all the people. And there's no list. There was never a list. There was no, or certainly none that I ever saw, none I ever heard of, none that I ever witnessed, there's no list. There's never been a list.
And then you also had her shooting down the theory that Epstein had dirt on other people that he blackmailed them with.
I never heard him ask any question of any masseuse who may have given a massage to a friend who was on the island or in Palm Beach or anywhere else for that, any details about that massage. Like, does he have a funky foot? No, I never heard that. It's weird.
Right, and then when asked whether Epstein was affiliated in any way with the FBI, the CIA, or any other intelligence or law enforcement agency, she replied,
I don't think so. I think that I don't remember anything like that. I just don't think he had the wherewithal, and I think that whole aspect of that is, can I use a bad word?
Yes. Yes.
Bullshit.
While you had many skeptical of what this woman who has been charged with perjury is saying, she did throw at least one thing out there that Trump's people have been trying to fight.
I do not believe he died by suicide, no.
Do you have any speculation or view of who killed him?
No, I don't.
Why would somebody kill him in prison?
Somebody can pay a prisoner to kill you for $25 worth of commissary is about the going rate for a hit with a lock today.
To the extent that folks believe that he was murdered to keep him quiet or because he had information on rich and powerful people, do you have any reason to believe that that's true?
I do not.
The next up, Maxwell was asked about Epstein's relationships with certain notable figures, starting with Bill Clinton.
Do you know whether, for example, President Clinton ever received a massage?
I don't believe he did.
With Maxwell then adding that whenever Clinton was on Epstein's plane, that it was actually for humanitarian purposes, right? He had a foundation. And then there was RFK Jr.
Bobby knew Mr. Epstein
How do you know that?
because we went on a trip together. We went to dinosaur bone hunting in the Dakotas. I want to say 93, 94.
But then notably here, she later added.
I never saw anything inappropriate with Mr. Kennedy.
And then lastly, you had Maxwell talking about herself, repeatedly denying that she saw anything suspicious.
Him being physical with women. I did see that, but nothing that was not consensual. I'm not saying that Mr. Epstein did not do those things. I don't feel comfortable saying that today, given what I now know to be true. So I'm not here to defend him. But what I can say is that I did not participate in that activity.
Right, and then Maxwell, she also made this very specific denial.
I've never recruited a masseuse from Mar-a-Lago.
And that, of course, is notable because Virginia Giuffre claimed to have been recruited by Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago when she was a spa attendant there. But Maxwell also seemed to address some of Giuffre's allegations more directly, calling bullshit on the claim that Prince Andrew had sex with a victim whose name was bleeped out of the interview, but appears to be Giuffre. And Maxwell even said that she believes a notorious photo of that victim and Prince Andrew together is, quote, literally fake. But then, with all of this, you have the family of Giuffre, who took her own life this year, having responded to the interview, saying, during Todd Blanche's bizarre interview, she is never challenged about her court-proven lies, providing her a platform to rewrite history. This travesty of justice entirely invalidates the experiences of the many brave survivors who put their safety, security, and lives on the line to ensure her conviction, including our sister. Though with that, it does appear like very soon we're going to be hearing from Giuffre again. Right, and that because her memoir is going to be published on October 21st, with its publisher saying that it'll include new details about her experiences with Epstein and Maxwell's associates, including Prince Andrew. Though they also added that the book contains no allegations of misconduct involving President Trump. But also, even if we don't get anything earth-shattering out of the Maxwell interview or the Giuffre memoir, of course, there's still the holy grail of the evidence, which is the thing that people actually want, the Epstein files. Right, the White House turned this into the Epstein grand jury transcripts and the Epstein interview, but everyone's been asking about the Epstein files. And on that front, I mean, we talked last week about how the House Oversight Committee had subpoenaed the DOJ for the complete cache of files, with the department promising to begin delivering them on Friday. And well, on Friday, they actually did do that, but reportedly, they only sent the committee 33,295 pages out of the roughly 100,000. With then the top Democrat on the committee, Robert Garcia, saying that 97% of those contain nothing but information that's already been public, and saying that just 3% or less than 1,000 pages contain anything new. Those reportedly including flight logs between 2000 and 2014, as well as forms consistent with re-entry back to the U.S. Now with that, a Republican spokesperson for the committee told the New York Times that this was only the first batch of documents and that more would be forthcoming. You have Garcia not buying that excuse, with him arguing there is no excuse for incomplete disclosures. Survivors and the American public deserve the truth. This after he already declared last week releasing the Epstein files in batches just continues this White House cover-up. Hand-picked, partial productions are wholly insufficient and potentially misleading. And according to the terms of the subpoena, the DOJ was supposed to hand over all of the documents by August 19th, which was last Tuesday. So even this incomplete release came late, and apparently we're still waiting for the batch that includes the parts where, according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump's name is mentioned. And actually, on that note, on Friday, before the files got handed over, Trump was asked whether he thinks they should be released. And within 20 seconds, this guy went from yes, absolutely, to they might embarrass some people though, to I don't care, do it anyway, to it's all a hoax.
They wanted to release. People shouldn't be hurt, but I'm in support of keeping it totally open. I couldn't care less. You got a lot of people that it could be mentioned in those files that don't deserve to be. People, because he knew everybody in Palm Beach. I don't know anything about that, but I have said to Pam and everybody else, give them everything you can give them, because it's a Democrat hoax. It's just a hoax. The whole Epstein thing is a Democrat hoax.
But of course, with all that said, this is going to be something we keep our eyes on, especially because in the meantime, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are still full steam ahead with their plan to force a vote in the House next month that could compel the DOJ to release the files. And today, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Epstein's estate for his will, any disclosure agreements he signed, the non-prosecutorial agreement he signed in 2007, and any document that could be a potential client list, phone logs, and visitors logs. With the committee's chairman, James Comer, also announcing that Alex Acosta, the former prosecutor who gave the infamous plea deal to Epstein back in 2008 and later served as Trump's first-term labor secretary, will appear for a transcribed interview next month. And then we're going to dive even deeper in just a minute. But first, let me ask, do you remember that doctor's appointment that you've been avoiding? You know, the one that's been on your list since, 2022? Maybe it's a dentist appointment for your biannual cleaning, or the annual checkup that is now a triannual checkup, or the rash. It's definitely not getting any better. Which I'll say, no judgment. We all procrastinate. But here is the deal. Our sponsor, ZocDoc, they make it stupid easy to book a doctor's appointment. Because ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search, compare high-quality in-network doctors, and click click to instantly book an appointment. You can filter by insurance, location, and choose a doctor who's a perfect fit. And ZocDoc has over 100,000 doctors across every specialty: mental health, dental, dermatology, urgent care, you name it. Once you find the right doctor, you can book an appointment instantly. And I'm talking 24 to 72 hours or same-day appointments. No more waiting forever to get in. It's quick, it's easy, and it gets you back on track. I personally use ZocDoc. It was definitely a lifesaver when I moved in the last year. As I'm getting older, I'm realizing you gotta listen to your body. It's sending you signals. Ignoring the signals, it doesn't make them disappear. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments, scan that QR code, or go to ZocDoc.com/Phil to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Phil, ZocDoc.com/Phil. But then next up, we move on from Epstein to the stuff that Trump may be doing to distract everyone from Epstein. But that's not to say it's a nothing. It's still a very, very big deal. Because National Guard troops are now carrying weapons in D.C., and Trump's getting ready to deploy the military to even more U.S. cities. And starting with the situation in D.C., it's now been 2 weeks since Trump declared a crime emergency in the city, with Trump misrepresenting data to put the police department under direct federal control and deploy the National Guard. And notably here, the initial deployment orders specify that the National Guard personnel, while wearing body armor, would not be armed or carry weapons in their vehicles. However, you now have more than 2,000 National Guard troops patrolling the nation's capital, and at least some of them packing. And with that, you have a spokesperson for the Joint Task Force overseeing the mission claiming that all units with firearms have been trained and they're authorized to use force only as a last resort and solely in response to an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. You also have a White House official adding that the Guard will, quote, continue protecting federal assets, including officers, providing a safe environment for officers to make arrests if needed, and providing a visible law enforcement presence to deter crime as they have been since the operation began. Right, and with that, while troops still aren't authorized to make arrests themselves, you got a statement from the force saying that detentions may occur leading to arrests. That said, though, it seems like many troops are being kept out of the action, with, for example, Reuters reporting that National Guard members have been concentrated near the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and in view of the U.S. Capitol, which are pretty much the safest parts of the city. And so then, on the flip side, you've got people in Ward 8, right, the area with the highest crime rate in the city. They've reportedly been saying that there's been little to no military presence at all, which is really notable because the murder rate is so much worse there than in other parts of D.C. that many locals reportedly said they would welcome troops on their streets. Although, to be clear, this whole thing, overall, it is still wildly unpopular. A recent poll found that roughly 80% of the city's residents are opposed to the deployment of both federal officers and the National Guard. But polling aside, right, the lack of troops in high crime areas, it's one reason that you have many people saying that this massive deployment is just a show of power more than a serious effort to fight crime. Although I will say there's also a concern that the true purpose here is actually going after undocumented immigrants, right? Because while we have seen a decent drop in reported crime since this started, we've also seen a huge spike in immigration arrests. And if you try to make a comparison, you'll find that over the first 6 months of Trump's term, ICE arrested about 12 immigrants in D.C. per week on average. But since August 7th, a few days before the takeover, federal officials have arrested 300 people in the city. And in fact, according to analysis, that's more than 10 times the typical ICE arrest numbers for the district. That said, beyond immigration, we've also seen an effort to ramp up the crackdown with things like U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro directing prosecutors to charge the most serious crimes possible in each case and to do so in federal court, where notably sentences tend to run much longer. Though you then also had her telling them to not charge felony offenses for people carrying shotguns or rifles. And with that, she referred to a DOJ memo claiming that D.C. law conflicts with recent Supreme Court rulings on gun rights. But then with all that, what we've ended up seeing is that many people are ending up with serious charges in connection to low-level offenses. And then for the people who do get arrested, Trump's now trying to make it harder for them to make bail. And specifically here, he's threatening to withhold federal funding or government-backed project approvals from D.C. if it doesn't eliminate what's called cashless bail. Right, cash bail, on the other hand, is something D.C. mostly got rid of in the 1990s. And what that means is it's up to the judge to decide whether a defendant should be released from prison based on the risk of not showing up to trial, instead of being based on how much money he or she has in their bank account. And if you followed this, Trump's railed against cashless bail, claiming that it lets criminals back out onto the street and puts people in danger. Though notably, their statistics show an extremely small percentage of defendants are arrested for violent crimes while awaiting trial. Of course, stats aren't Trump's strong suit. Right? You saw that again on Friday when you had him speaking in the Oval Office, touting his success in D.C., claiming crime has dropped to virtually zero, and specifically celebrating the fact that there hadn't been any murders in the past week.
That's the first time in memory that that's happened, if you can believe it.
Which if you're like, no, I don't believe that, you wouldn't be wrong. It's not even the first week without homicides this year, not even close. There were also no murders reported from May 4th through May 11th, April 11th to the 17th, and more than a 2-week-long period from February 25th through March 12th. Which again, is not to say there are not too many murders in DC, but Trump's claims are just blatantly false. And that matters even more than usual because the same kind of false and misleading claims are being used to justify potential future deployments of the National Guard to cities like Chicago.
We haven't had to bring in the regular military, which we're willing to do. We have to. And after we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough.
And actually, to focus on Chicago for a second, while crime's still obviously a problem, it's one that is getting better. The city is actually experiencing a historic drop in homicides right now. But despite that, the Pentagon's actually been planning a military deployment to Chicago for weeks, according to the Washington Post, with officials reportedly telling the outlet that the operation would involve mobilizing at least a few thousand members of the National Guard as soon as September, with them then also noting that the use of thousands of active duty troops in Chicago has been discussed, but is considered less likely at this time. With then Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson calling the potential deployment of National Guard troops to his city unlawful, unsustainable, and adding, there are many things the federal government could do to help us reduce crime and violence in Chicago, but sending in the military is not one of them. Also, very notably, another person that's been very outspoken in his criticism of Trump's decision to deploy the military in U.S. cities is Maryland Governor Wes Moore. And actually, that has seemingly moved Baltimore up in Trump's list of cities to target. Though again, even as the city is showing improvement in terms of crime. And actually, the back and forth between Moore and Trump has been very interesting to watch. Just a few days ago, you had Moore formally inviting President Trump to visit the state and participate in a public safety walk, writing in a letter. In the first 6 months of 2025, the Baltimore Police Department continued to see double-digit reductions in gun violence, including a 22% decrease in homicides and a 19% decrease in non-fatal shootings from the year before. We are currently on track to have the lowest number of homicides in Baltimore City since we began officially keeping crime statistics. And adding, even in the face of millions of dollars in cuts to federal funding for violence intervention and gun violence prevention under your administration, our state and local communities continue to invest in proven strategies that help us build safer, more vibrant communities. So he then dropped the formal tone when speaking in person.
Donald Trump, if you are not willing to walk our communities, keep our name out of your mouth.
And then you had Trump responding by accusing Moore of taking a, quote, rather nasty and provocative tone and adding, as a president, I would much prefer that he clean up this crime disaster before I go there for a walk. Wes Moore's record on crime is a very bad one unless he fudges his figures on crime like many of the other blue states are doing. But if Wes Moore needs help like Gavin Newsom did in LA, I will send in the troops, which is being done in nearby DC, and quickly clean up the crime. And then, I guess just for good measure, he also threatened to try and take back federal funding sent to try and replace the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which was destroyed after a container ship crashed into it last year. But ultimately, we're gonna have to wait to see how all this plays out, especially because unlike in DC, Trump doesn't have the power to take control of a local police force. And he's not supposed to be able to deploy a state's National Guard against a governor's wishes unless certain conditions are met. Of course, I say shouldn't because he claimed that conditions were met when he did what he did in LA just a few months ago. And I mean, we're still waiting to see what a court has to say about that. But for now, one thing that's clear is that Moore has no intention of backing down, and he even laid out his reasons in an interview on CBS yesterday.
One, it is not sustainable. You cannot continue this type of pace of operations, particularly when it's costing over $1 million a day in order to do this. The second, it's not scalable. You're not going to be able to do this in every single major American city, particularly when many of the cities that have the highest crime rates are the places that have actually deployed their National Guards to Washington, D.C. The third, it's unconstitutional. It's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment. The fourth reason is because it's deeply disrespectful to the members of the National Guard. You know, as someone who actually deployed overseas and served my country in combat, to ask these men and women to do a job that they're not trained for is just deeply disrespectful. There is a multitude of reasons that I'm against this, and I will not authorize the Maryland National Guard to be utilized for this.
And then beyond that, we're also seeing Moore making a name for himself on the national political scene by weighing in on the congressional redistricting in Texas. Moore showing some spine and saying doing the same in Maryland is not off the table.
But if the President of the United States is putting his finger on the scale to try to manipulate elections because he knows that his policies cannot win in a ballot box, then it behooves each and every one of us to be able to keep all options on the table to ensure that the voters' voices can actually be heard.
Trump, meanwhile, is apparently feeling betrayed, claiming Moore once privately told him that he was the greatest president of his lifetime.
He should say, you're the greatest president of my lifetime.
To which Moore simply replied, lol. Keep telling yourself that, Mr. President. But for now, we watch, we wait, and in the meantime, I'd really love to know your thoughts, reactions, and opinions here. But then, next up, hopping from one legal battle to another, Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been detained again, and the Trump administration is threatening to deport him to Uganda. And just this afternoon, we got the news that a federal judge has temporarily blocked him from being deported to Uganda until she can hold a hearing. And that is an absolutely massive new twist in what's become one of the most publicized and closely watched stories of President Trump's immigration crackdown. Because Abrego Garcia is that Maryland father who first came into the public eye after The Atlantic reported that he had been wrongfully deported to a prison in El Salvador because of an administrative error. This despite the fact that, one, he had protected status that prevented him from specifically being sent back to El Salvador because of the threat of gang violence that his family had fled when he was a teenager, and two, he hadn't actually been charged with any crime. Then with that, you might remember, in order to try and justify their actions, the Trump administration claimed that Abrego Garcia was a member of the violent street gang MS-13, labeling him a terrorist. And that, despite Abrego Garcia denying those claims and several judges even casting doubt on the evidence used to support the allegations. And for a while, while, you had the Trump administration dragging their feet about getting him back, even after the Supreme Court ruled that his deportation was illegal and that Trump officials needed to facilitate his return as ordered by a federal judge. And then in early June, nearly 2 months after his wrongful removal, the Trump administration finally brought Abrego Garcia back, but only so they could slap him with human smuggling charges, with prosecutors alleging that he had been part of a years-long conspiracy to haul illegal immigrants from Texas to other parts of the U.S. and claiming that, again, he was also an MS-13 gang member. Though with that, Abrego Garcia denied those accusations. But regardless, after that, he was sent to jail in Tennessee, where he was facing the charges. And while a federal judge ruled that he was eligible for release while awaiting his trial, his lawyers worried that the Trump administration would immediately detain and deport him if he was released, so he ultimately was kept in custody. That is, until last Friday, when he was released from jail and allowed to return to his family following court rulings that prevented the Trump administration from immediately detaining and deporting him to El Salvador, with those orders also outlining a set of conditions for his release, including check-ins with immigration officials at the ICE field office in Baltimore. But, according to reports, the court orders only prevented Abrego Garcia from deportation to El Salvador. They didn't prevent him from being deported to any other country. And so apparently, that's exactly what the Trump administration is trying to do. Very shortly after his release on Friday, Abrego Garcia's lawyers claimed in court documents that the administration was trying to force their client to plead guilty or face deportation to Uganda, with his lawyers claiming that the day before his release, the government had offered a plea deal that stipulated that he remain in jail, plead guilty to the federal charges against him, and serve whatever sentence got handed down. Right, and in exchange, once his sentence was complete, the government would agree to deport him to Costa Rica, where he could live freely, assuring him that the government there would agree to accept him as either a refugee or a legal resident. But then, the lawyers claimed that within minutes of Abrego Garcia's release on Friday, ICE informed his legal team that they intended to deport him to Uganda and ordered him to report to the Baltimore field office on Monday morning, and adding that he had until first thing Monday morning to accept the plea deal, quote, or else that offer will be off the table forever. And this notably coming just days after the Ugandan government announced that it had reached a deal with the Trump administration to accept migrants from other countries that the U.S. was seeking to deport. And so as a result, you had his lawyers arguing that this plea deal is further evidence that the government is trying to punish Abrego Garcia for challenging his illegal removal to El Salvador, accusing the Trump administration of trying to coerce Abrego Garcia into pleading guilty and noting that they are threatening to deport him to Uganda even though Costa Rica agreed to accept him, and claiming this is just more evidence for why the judge overseeing the case in Tennessee should throw the charges out, saying the prosecution is vindictive and selective. And that's also something that's been repeatedly echoed by his lawyers' public statements, with one arguing the fact that they're holding Costa Rica as a carrot and using Uganda as a stick to coerce him is such clear evidence that they're weaponizing the immigration system in a manner that is completely unconstitutional. But ultimately today, he was detained again and taken into custody by ICE after showing up for his check-in at the Baltimore field office, with Abrego Garcia arriving to a crowd of supporters holding signs demanding his freedom and addressing the demonstrators in Spanish before entering the office, with him thanking those who stood with him and calling on the immigrant community to continue fighting and not give up hope, saying regardless of what happens today with ICE, promise me this, that you will keep fighting, praying, believing in dignity and liberty, not just for me, but for all. With his lawyer then later emerging from the facility to inform the crowd that his client had been detained, and saying that when they went to the office this morning, the government's stated intention for the meeting was just a routine check-in interview that was part of his conditions for release, and adding, clearly, that was false, and claiming that the immigration officials refused to tell him why Abrego Garcia was actually being detained or even where he was being taken. But in a post on X, the Department of Homeland Security announced that ICE had arrested Abrego Garcia and that he will, quote, be processed for removal to Uganda. Though, very notably here, you had the permanent secretary of Uganda's Ministry of Foreign Affairs telling the New York Times that the government had not yet received a formal communication from the U.S. that Abrego Garcia would be sent there. And also, shortly after he was detained, his legal team filed a new lawsuit fighting his deportation and filing what is called a habeas petition, requesting that he be assured his due process rights to not be removed from the U.S. until he can make his case for humanitarian protection, with the petition claiming that the Trump administration had re-arrested Abrego Garcia without allowing him to express fears of persecution and torture that could happen if he was deported to Uganda. And just this afternoon, we got the news that a federal judge has temporarily blocked him from being deported to Uganda until she can hold a hearing. So of course, we're going to have to see what actually happens because the Trump administration has repeatedly ignored court orders and normal judicial processes throughout this entire case. And so you've many saying, there's no reason to expect that they would stop now. But that, my friend, is the end of today's show. Tap or click right here to watch your newest episode of my podcast, or tap or click right here to watch the most recent Philip DeFranco show. I've even got links in the description for you for either of those, for YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you most enjoy getting filled in. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.